Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Mobile Overview Report, the MOVR Report by Sencha Mobile. Every quarter, we publish a report on the latest mobile usage trends. In this quarter, we cover the fourth quarter of 2017. That's October through December. And also every quarter, we host a webinar to walk you through some of the highlights of that report. So thanks for joining us. We're going to get started right now. Our hosts today are myself, Ken Jones. Let me introduce myself. I am the Vice President of Marketing for Sencha Mobile, and I've worked in mobile telecommunications for over 15 years. I've consulted with many of the largest mobile operators around the world. I've worked with startups in the fixed mobile convergence and deep packet inspection space, and I've been deeply involved with analytics in the network infrastructure and mobile device industry. And today we are joined by a guest panelist, Sanida Bratt. She is the SVP of Innovation for HYLA Mobile. Sanida, can you give a quick background?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Ken, and good morning, everyone. A little bit about myself. I have worked in mobile industry for over 15 years, with most of my career spent leading product management efforts in the area of mobile connectivity and digital content delivery for companies such as Verizon, Navteq, Nokia here, Synchronous, and a couple of startups. I was also a co-founder of Sapiens Knowledge Systems, an analytics company focused on mobile usage optimization, which was acquired by Synchronous. And today I had innovation at HYLA with focus on enabling transparent and optimized secondary market for mobile devices, which is powered by HYLA's data, insights, and advanced analytics platform. And I'm very excited to join Ken today and share insights about mobile device secondary market.
Great. Well, thank you, Sanida. And yeah, today we have two sources of data that we're going to be sharing with you, and I think they complement each other really well. And they're in agreement with each other, which is probably even more important. So we're going to be talking about pricing of cell phones, the manufacturer's suggested retail price, and also prices that are in the secondary market, so the average sales price. And we'll get into a little more detail about that. So quick agenda overview. We're going to do these introductions. I'll talk a little bit about what device intelligence and device detection is and why it's important to various industries. And then we'll get into some of the details of the mobile overview report. We'll touch on the iPhone 8 and 8 Plus and 8 X launch. We'll call it the X, not 10. And we'll call it and we're going to compare that to the Google Pixel 2 launch. We'll also touch on the average smartphone price trends that we're seeing over a 2-year period from 2015 to 2017, and also the average age of smartphones and how that's changed from 2015 to 2017. Next, we'll get into a spotlight on Europe, since Mobile World Congress is coming up, and hopefully a lot of you are attending. We will look at some of the European countries there, and if you want to stop and see us at Mobile World Congress, we'll let you know how to do that. And then the top devices in North America, Europe, and Asia. This is something that we do in our standard mobile overview report, the MOVR report, that is available for download now. And we'll leave time for questions at the end. So what is device detection? So device detection is technology that lets owners of websites identify the types of devices that are being used by their visitors. Not only does device detection identify the device manufacturer and model, which you might expect, but it also identifies other attributes like the operating system, the version of the operating system, the screen size, the resolution, what type of browser is being used. Is it an app that's actually doing the browsing? Like, is it Facebook that has launched its own browser? And two other things. The manufacturer's suggested retail price is something that we can glean from that device detection. And the release date, the age of the device, can be identified. So why is this information useful? Well, problems occur in the mobile experience today. With a highly fragmented set of devices visiting a website, you have poor mobile experiences. Sometimes you see slow loading images, and the people that own the websites need better insights into mobile measurements in order to fix a lot of problems. And the solutions that we provide are device detection, let you optimize and target either your user experience, advertisements, that's a very important use case, and perhaps the navigation that you use on the website. You can also use adaptive image content delivery networks, CDNs, that has the effect of right sizing the images to the type of device that is coming to it. It makes for a much faster experience. And then finally, device analytics. You can identify this device and put it into your data warehouses and do the sort of analytics and troubleshooting that you need to do. For all the sorts of companies, these problems can cost millions of dollars in lost sales. So it's a worthwhile investment to get your site working with device detection. Looking a little closer at the advertising industry, this is the value chain for the advertising industry laid out here from the audience all the way up to the advertiser. And it gets a little complicated. I won't go into a lot of details, but just to let you know, device detection can help the publishers identify who's coming to their websites. And this is helpful for passing along more information about the attractiveness of their audience and the open inventory they had for advertising. And just by passing this information along from the left up to the right here, they can increase their banner CPM prices by about 30%. And as you move up the value chain, there's a common language for passing along this device detection information. It's usually passed along according to the OpenRTB device object in the RTB spec, which is defined by the Interactive Advertising Bureau. Sounds really technical, but essentially there's a set of information that is handed from the supply side to the demand side. And the DSPs, the demand side platforms, they have even more incentive to go the extra mile. They can detect what I call enhanced device targeting information and use this information to help advertisers identify attributes that will let them segment and focus their ads on an audience that's most likely to respond. So you get a better ROI by using this sort of device targeting information. But narrowing down on prices of phones, why is this important? Well, when I talk about price from Centra Mobile, we'll be talking about the manufacturer's suggested retail price, which is the price that the phone is set at by Apple or Samsung. There's another element of that Sanida will touch on. Device detection is one of the few things that in real time you can help to profile a visitor to a site. And there are things like location and what carrier they're on. But in addition to the device, you can get an economic profile of your user based upon the device. This is one of the few things that in an instant you can identify that this person has paid for a premium phone that costs over $800, and the age of it. The age is actually very important also. The age is within a couple of months of its release. So this is an early adopter that has a willingness to pay for an expensive device. Very useful information for advertisers, also for e-commerce players. They might want to tailor the suggested offers to someone based upon the device that they have. Consulting and investment banking people use our information for studies and investments that they do, and likewise carriers are interested. So there is the manufacturer's suggested retail price, but HYLA Mobile is here because they have insights into what is termed the average sales price, which is the actual price that's in the secondary market. So I'm going to pause here and let Sanida talk a little bit about what HYLA Mobile is.
All right. Thanks, Ken. So let me just give you a little bit of an example of what secondary market is. So as we mentioned, HYLA deals with secondary market of mobile devices, meaning that we extend the life of a pre-owned device by giving it a second life and even third life. So for example, devices may be in the market for, 5 or 6 years after its initial purchase. So on HYLA side, we provide technology and services to carriers, retailers, and OEMs to help them run their trade-in programs, from device collection through processing of those devices to device disposition into the secondary market. So to give you an example, if you have purchased a new device at, for example, an AT&T store, and as part of that transaction, you traded in your old pre-owned device, the technology platform from HYLA enables that trade-in transaction. So once the pre-owned devices are collected, they're shipped to a processing center. And then within the processing center, devices undergo what we call data sanitization and inspection. So as part of data sanitization, our leading edge software is used to clear personal data from consumer devices. So for example, SIMs and memory cards are removed, secured, and shredded. And then our automated tools allow multiple devices to be wiped simultaneously. As part of device inspection, an efficient combination of automated tests and manual review followed by quality control checks ensures the most accurate grading possible for those devices. And then essentially these processes ensure that all critical steps have been completed and the device is truly ready for sale and redistribution into a secondary market. And so these devices are ready for redistribution and they're stored in secure hubs. And then as part of HYLA's process, we resell and redistribute these pre-owned inventory to our global resale channels, essentially achieving the greatest and highest recovery rates in the market. So all the decisions, as you can see, this is essentially a kind of a supply chain management, and all of the decisions are powered by our analytics platform.
Great.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. So one of the things that we're going to be comparing here is the manufacturer's suggested retail price versus the average sales price. And so the average sales price is what you actually will see in the secondary market. So let's take a look at a couple of examples here. The iPhone versus the Google Pixel 2. One of the things we like to update you on is the success of phones that are being launched into the market and how quickly they're being adopted. And our data, as opposed to actually the count of the phones that are sold into the market, our data looks at the actual usage, browsing usage. And so you get a sense of what is truly being used by consumers out in the market. The iPhone 8, 8 Plus, and iPhone X were launched in October, actually September. The iPhone X had a bit of a delay, but it did come out. And you can see here all three climbing to around the 1.3% level. So that's 1.3% of all smartphone usage. The iPhone 8 was the best performing, or I should say the iPhone 8 Plus is the best performing at this point. And when you compare it to the Google Pixel 2, which is the flagship phone for Google, which was launched in October, the Google Pixel 2 hasn't really moved the needle too much. It's still well less than 1%. and the iPhone 8 has a lead over it of at least 1%. Um, so it's an interesting thing that we're seeing here. The pricing on the iPhone 8, 8 Plus, and iPhone X is has been structured in kind of a nice Goldilocks. You know, where's the sweet spot? And not surprisingly, the iPhone 8 Plus, which is the middle-priced phone, is doing the best. But one of the interesting things is that even with Apple, which is a premium brand, the iPhone X is this green line is doing quite well. It's not really lagging too far behind. In fact, all three phones are doing quite well. So they've covered a wide but lucrative part of that premium market with these three phones. Now, looking at these flagship phones, you think, oh, is there a secondary market? Well, actually, phones end up in the secondary market pretty quickly. So, a quick overview of the of how things get into the secondary market and what that secondary market looks like. Sanida will walk us through.
Yeah, so as Ken mentioned, we do see obviously even the flagship phones and brand new phones entering the secondary market quite quickly and soon after actually their initial release. Although of course the volume of those types of devices and those types of transactions are very, very low. What we do see from the trends perspective is that usually a release of a new device or a flagship device drives most trade-in transactions from N-2 generation devices. And what that means is, for example, in the case of iPhone in 2017, we see significant number of iPhone 6 and 6 Plus devices entering secondary market. And this is a similar trend and observation that we see year over year over year, and essentially is giving us kind of a trend to look at, saying that devices N-2 generation devices are the devices that are being replaced by these flagship devices as they enter secondary market. In addition to that, the ASP, each one of these devices obviously have the average selling price, and even the brand new flagship devices, although they enter the market and they have very high MSRPs, as Ken was talking about, they at that very time they're also assigned their trade-in value as well as their average selling price in the secondary market value.
Yeah.
So Ken, if you go to the next slide. So essentially what this slide is showing and what this data is showing, it really correlates to this N-2 generation devices, where it's showing that a device's average age of a devices is about 2.57 years, with obviously iPhone being a little bit higher, and then other Android devices being around 2.26 years.
Great. That's really fascinating. I like the concept of this N-2 generation, because well, anecdotally it corresponds to experience that I have, but yeah, it looks like the you can really get a sense of what you can expect to come onto the market at any given time. So let's look at the prices by continent. And in this study, what we've done is we have broken down the MSRP, the manufacturer's suggested retail price, by both continent, country, and operating system. So when you're looking at North America, the iPhones, which is essentially the iOS, Apple is pretty consistent in their pricing, that it does not go below $800. So the variation you see here is really a kind of a mix on the list price of phones from various generations. Today, for example, the iPhone X starts at $999 and can go as high with various configurations as $1,149. And that kind of moves this a little bit, but in reality, it's a pretty static thing because we're only looking at Apple iPhones. And the same goes for different continents. You can see here a pretty consistent view across Asia with Vietnam, Thailand, Singapore all listed out. They all are kind of around that $850 range over a 2-year period. So there hasn't been, Apple has not done a price cut in order to grow their market share. In fact, one might argue with the iPhone X, they've actually kind of moved up the market and put out an even super premium price. But when you look at the actual secondary market, there's some interesting stuff going on here that Sanida will walk through. And here we have the iPhones, the average sales price that you see in the secondary market.
Yeah, so from the secondary market perspective, one of the things that we look at is really trends year over year over year, and how that residual value of those devices is trending. So, for example, as I mentioned before, the most popular device that's entering the secondary market today is the iPhone 6. iPhone 6 today has an average selling price ASP a little bit below $200 in the wholesale secondary market. If you look, for example, the behavior of that from year over year, you could kind of look at, for example, the values of iPhone 7 and 7 Plus, which was introduced in 2016. Their ASPs essentially decline about 25% and then 19% respectively year over year. And then also for iPhone 6, we see the decline, for example, of about 41% between 2016 and 58% from 2015. So this is kind of very important for us. As I mentioned, these devices are, they may have second life, they may have a third life, and so as the years go by, you can actually see the curve and the change of the average selling price.
Great. Now, when we look at the Android, it's a little bit different picture. Of course, there's a lot more competition in terms of manufacturers who are producing Android devices. And what we've seen in North America is that there has been a drop in the manufacturer's suggested retail price. So the manufacturers are competing on price a lot more aggressively. If you look at what has happened in the United States, we've seen a drop from $605 for the average, or for the MSRP in the United States, down to $465. And in Canada, it's been quite dramatic. You've seen a 614 down to 273. The influx of a lot of lower price Chinese phones, the Huawei brand and some other players helps to explain this sort of drop. But at the same time, there are budget phones that are being offered by what I'll call a premium brand, Samsung. They have their J series phones, which are getting more and more popular among a lot of the population in these countries. Mexico has also seen a declining trend, although their starting point was lower. So 384 down to 337. Looking at Asia, you also see some interesting trends. So Indonesia saw the largest drop in the Android smartphone MSRP. So they went from 409 down to 205. And you can see that several countries are in the right around that $200 mark as the average MSRP in 2017. Certain countries had a higher starting point. Singapore went from 708 down to 555. The only one that really bucked the trend is Thailand. Thailand actually saw an increase from 381 up to 487. So interesting trends here about the price competition that's going on, at least from a list price. Now, when we look at the actual secondary market, Sanida will provide us a little more insight here.
Yes, on the secondary market, similar to MSRP, as Ken was talking about, Android devices in general enter the secondary market at a lower price point than the iOS devices. So, for example, I mentioned previously that iPhone 6 enters secondary market at around $200 ASP. We see here that a comparable Samsung device of the same generation is entering it at about $100, sub-$100, etc. So you're seeing devices entering at a lower price. At the same time, if you look at the residual value curve decline, for Samsung devices, we see that curve decline being similar to about 40% year-over-year since 2015 for Samsung Galaxy S6. Obviously, the decline, the residual value curve decline is different for different types of Android devices. So Samsung still obviously demands a premium in the secondary market on the Android side. If you compare that to LG devices on the next slide, you see these devices also entering the market at a lower price with residual value curve declining a little bit faster, in some instances seeing a decline in as high as 50% year-over-year.
Right.
Of similar types of devices.
Great. And just remind us that the volume that you see Android versus iPhones, most of the demand that you see for devices and your ability to resell them is on the iPhone side, correct?
I mean, we see the volume for both iPhone and Android, mostly higher end Android though, versus the lower end. So mostly higher end Android devices. But we see for both, although iOS devices demand a higher premium price and need in the market in general.
Right. Okay. Great. So that's one element of it, of pricing, but another factor that gets impacted by this secondary market is the age of the smartphone. So we also looked at the age of devices across different countries, and I should say that we're looking at North America and Asia. If you want a more expansive view, you can go and download our complete mover report, and it has Europe and South America also broken out. So we'll give you some more information about how to download that at the end. So in North America, the United States actually had the youngest iOS or iPhone age back in 2015 at 633 days. But we've seen an increasing trend here. People are holding on to their devices. And at the end, or during 2017, the age of the iOS got to 894 days. This trend is echoed in Canada, although they actually started at a higher point and have gotten over 1,000 to 1,045 days. And Mexico also sees people hanging on to their iPhones a little longer, moving from 714 to 1,185. In the Android side of the house, it's not. We do see people holding on to devices, but it's not quite as market of an increase. So 624 moving up to 677, and Mexico went from 647 up to 800. A slight decline in Canada. I think this might be related once again to some of the influx that we might have seen of a lower price uh, Android provider in the Canadian market that has driven down. People have switched over to lower priced products, and that has reduced the average age of the phone. Now in Asia, I'm going to let Sanida jump in here a little bit. As you can see, these the prices or the age of the phone has increased from 715 up to 955 in Bangladesh, and this trend is pretty consistent across all of them. And yeah, I'll ask Sanita, is there what impact do you think the secondary market is having in driving some of these numbers?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at these numbers, it seems to me, it would seem that in some of the countries, essentially the secondary market is, impacting the numbers of the ages, because probably some of these devices, second life devices, third life devices, are really being prominently used in those markets. Hence, we see the age of the devices in those markets being larger, right?
Yeah, and looking at the iPhone side, it's really quite impressive to see like a company or a country like India moving from 739 days up to over 1100 days. It's This is being driven by older devices that have a release date of a long time ago. It'd be still going strong in some of these markets.
Yeah, and then another interesting aspect of this is, we look at the age, but then also, on HYLA side, when you look at average selling price, in the past, average selling price of some of these secondary market devices was perhaps the highest in countries like in China, versus over the last year or so, we have seen a bit of a change in a trend where actually average selling prices are trending higher in countries like India and versus China, and in some instances there's quite large difference between two of the same devices. So average selling price for one device in India could be potentially 25% higher than average selling price of that same device in China.
Interesting.
Which potentially is a need, right, or demand for secondary market devices.
Right. So there really is a big difference in these prices from country to country, and the demand for the phone, different types of phones, really is quite distinct from country to country.
Exactly.
Right. And just to kind of go back, this is the average age of the devices returned, 2.75 years. And if you go back to the markets where they're showing up in Asia, you can see that they're extending well beyond that. So you can really kind of gauge that the impact that the secondary market has by looking at this current age of device and comparing it to the average age of the devices returned. Great. Okay, let's quickly turn to Europe. One of the things that we did this year or this quarter, is provide a little more detail about some of the top 5 countries in Europe. So what we did is we looked at Great Britain, Germany, Spain, and Poland, uh, and provided a little comparison about how they might look a little bit different. So Spain actually has an interesting smartphone trend that they have a significantly higher proportion of browsing when you look at all the different types of devices you can use, tablets versus smartphones versus desktops versus feature phones and smart TVs. We identify all of these. We actually also identify robots, which is quite useful for the advertising industry if we can kind of exclude those bots. But Spain actually has a pretty high percentage rate of 50% of smartphone browsing relative to other European countries. And they actually have a pretty high proportion of tablets. Their desktop usage is relatively low. Conversely, Poland actually still has a pretty high desktop proportion of usage. Interestingly, feature phones, we do not see many of those being used anymore, which is a trend that we've been seeing, but it's barely showing up in our radar anymore. One of the things that I'll just mention here is that we're going to be revising our definition of what a smartphone is to make sure that we're keeping it smart. There's the evolution of smartphones over the last several years has been pretty interesting, and we want to make sure that when we call something a smartphone, it's not including devices that are quite old and probably out of date anymore. So we'll provide a little more information on that as we go forward. In terms of the top smartphones, the interesting thing here is the supremacy of the iPhone 7. A couple of quarters ago, we were looking at the 6S as one of the most popular phones in the world, but now it's been eclipsed by the iPhone 7. In fact, it shows up in the 1 or 2 spot in all of these countries, and seems to really be holding on and being the most popular phone in the world at this point. Apple is doing quite well. If you look at Great Britain, the top 6 smartphones there are actually all Apple devices of different generations. Germany and Great Britain are dominated by Apple and Samsung devices, and you really only see other manufacturers showing up in like Poland has the P8 Lite and the LG K8. But for the most part, it's a duopoly at this point. Apple and Samsung are dominating those top 10 positions. The smartphone or the smartphone iOS versions, Apple has done a pretty good job of upgrading people to their latest operating system. So 60% of all users are on what I'll call 11.x version of their iOS operating system. But the interesting thing here is that there are a number of people that haven't made that change. So about 20 to 25% across these 5 countries are still on 10.3. There's some technical issues that, given the age of the device, you might not be able to upgrade. On the Android side, about 60% of users are either on version 6 or 7 of the Android operating system. And in fact, in Great Britain, about 44% of users are on the 7, and in Germany, 43%. So it's pretty good adoption of 7. The 8 that Oreo, as they call it, was released back in August of 2017, but has had a pretty limited distribution, and it's mainly on Pixel and Nexus devices at this stage. And taking a more global look, this is information that is in our MOVR report that looks at on a not a country by country, but just a continent basis. So as you can see, the iPhone 7 is the most popular device, 9.48% in North America, Oceania, Australia, has 12%, but it's a very popular phone at this point. The 6S is still quite popular, and the iPhone 6 is also there. The iPhone 8 has not made it onto this list yet, but I anticipate probably next quarter or the quarter following it will. On other devices, the new devices here are the Samsung S8. I believe this is the first quarter that it has shown up on the top 10 list here as we put it out. So we call this the top 10 list, but it's a top 10 for each continent. So potentially you could have 60, but there's overlap between them. So here it's around 20. But you see a lot of Samsung Galaxy and J versions, the S and J versions listed here. Okay, so that's about it for it. If you want to look at our MOVR visualization tool, it's available online where you can see real-time information on select parts of this, which is it's a very useful tool if you're interested in getting real-time data. It can extract that information, provide it in reports, and generate some PNGs for you. But if you're looking for a more customized approach, we can customize the MOVR data for you. It's available for purchase and licensing. A lot of investment firms, consultancies, analysts use the MOVR data to look at model information, smartphone trends, operating systems, chipsets, MSRP, and release data that we went over today. So there's hundreds of aspects of mobile web usage that we can provide to you on a customized basis in a data feed to you. And HYLA also has some data services. Sanida, you want to run people through this?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we from HYLA offer a subscription-based service that provides the overarching secondary market insights and risk management analytics. It includes the information that we cover today from the pricing perspective on both a buy side and the sell side across various different channels from wholesale to retail, as well as CPO and PO markets. But in addition to the pricing, it also provides information and the trends on different device conditions and grades. Secondary market is a bit different from the new devices, is because each device that enters secondary market could be a different grade and different condition of how much it was used, and the price is very much impacted by that condition. So that information is also available as part of our insights and analytics. We also do publish a quarterly trading report that is available on our website from hylamobile.com. But if you need additional information or you would like to be monitoring the trends and managing and optimizing the trading programs or understanding better secondary market, then our analytics platform is the right solution.
Great. So a Bloomberg for the secondary market. Very, very interesting and powerful tool there. If people have questions, they can go ahead and enter them into the question panel that hopefully everybody can find in the GoToWebinar interface. And we're going to be here for a couple more minutes to answer them. And if you want to meet us in person, Centra Mobile will be at the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona in Hall 8.1 and stand C13. If you'd like to set up a meeting, please contact us at at sales@sentiamobile.com, and we can arrange for a meeting there. It's usually a great conference. If you're in Europe, we'd love to talk to you about your data needs and also your device detection needs. Okay. There is a question. Let me see if I can, let's see if we can answer it. Who should we contact at HYLA Mobile to get a demo of the analytics platform? Sanida, you want to answer that?
Yeah, absolutely. You can contact me directly at sbratt@hylamobile.com, and I can coordinate that, or you can go on hylamobile.com and send an inquiry through Contact Us.
Okay, so sbratt@hylamobile.com. Great. Let's see. See if there are any other questions. So Sanida, as we're waiting here, just a quick question. The HYLA Mobile will also be at Mobile World Congress. Is that correct?
Yes, we will be at Mobile World Congress as well. We do not have a booth, but if anybody is interested in meeting with us, please, send me an email and we can coordinate a meeting.
Great, great. All right. Well, I think that's it for this quarter. Oh wait, you mentioned a report. What is the report? Yeah. So there is a mobile overview report that can be accessed from the Sentia Mobile website. So if you go to www.sentiamobile.com and under the resources, you will see the MOVR report page there. And that's a repository of our most recent report. You can download it from there. And you can also get an infographic, and this webinar will be posted there also. There's also back history of various webinars and reports that we've done. Some really interesting information in each one of those. A lot of them are still very relevant and timely today. And so please go ahead and visit our website, and we'll more than gladly send you, or you can download it and you can subscribe to the MOVR report, and every quarter we'll also send one out to you. Great. All right. Well, thank you, Sanida, for joining us today. It's great to talk to you and get your insights on the secondary market.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next quarter. Bye-bye.